It is 6 o'clock, so the joint work session of Clackamas Fire District 1 and Sandy Fire Districts number 72. Board of Directors will now come to order at 6 p.m. per ORS 192.610 to 192.690. Per ORS 192.650, the meeting is being recorded. The video recording of this meeting will be placed at the Clackamas Fire and Sandy Fire websites. I'm going to make a slight changes to the agenda. That is, I'm going to introduce myself and then rest of my board members introduce themselves. Then I'll ask Ms. Suhain to do the same with the board of directors. So I'm Thomas Joseph.
Marilyn Wall.
Jim Sering, Director of Clackamas.
Jake Ross.
Chris Oz.
Thank you. And
Okay, and I'm
Mr.
Sue.
Sue.
And
Ron Lasowski.
Andrew Bryan. Mark One.
Justin Stupler.
Gentlemen. Thank you. And now, Assistant Chief Leaders, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. We just have one clarification under number 4 on your agenda where it says questions. After the Triton presentation, that's the time for the elected officials to ask questions, and then we will move to public comment.
So that pertaining to board members' questions
That will
only.
be the elected officials, yes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet everybody here. Now I'd like to turn this time over to Division Chief Jason McKinnon for the next agenda item.
So the next agenda item is the introduction of the IGA Intergovernmental Agreement Committee, which is Mark Mounder and Justin Stuckler.
And for Clackamas, it was Thomas Joseph and Jim Sering. So thank you all for your participation in that.
Thank
So
you.
Melissa, are you going to have the slides up at this point?
Before that, Steve, can we
Yes.
introduce the Assistant Chief and the Chiefs?
Oh, yes.
I thought you were
absolutely.
going to do it during that IG, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Let's do that.
Brian Stewart, Assistant Chief with Clackamas Fire.
Steve Dieters, one of the assistant chiefs with Clackamas Fire.
Bill Schneider with Sandy Fire.
Nick Brown, Clackamas Fire.
Mark Whitaker, CFO with Clackamas Fire.
Thank you.
And then Melissa, we're going to have the presentation up.
I believe Kurt will.
Okay. All right, so I'll just take it from memory here. So and this could go awry, but I promise not to. So I just wanted to thank everybody that participated in this, especially for those of you that don't know, this started quite some time ago with Chief McKinnon and Chief Yerke for Clackamas Fire. I want to make sure I mentioned him, and I was dropped in about partway through to help kind of finish this up. But I wanted to thank everyone. There's multiple division heads and program managers and district managers that are not seen on the screen right now, but are paying attention to this. They were also contributors to the study. So I wanted to thank all of them for their contributions. And I wanted to thank Kurt and his team for their work. It was nice to kind of drop in the middle and not know where people had left off and kind of get everybody to start over and kind of start over, but to kind of get through that. And they're really patient with us, and I appreciated that. With all of our changes and all of that, we really wanted to make sure that we got things correct, and they were really good about follow-up and working with us. And so moving on to that, just wanted to also touch a little bit on history. We're all sitting in a room right now that has a lot of history. There's many people in this room. Director Searing started here. I started my career here at Boring Fire. You'll probably hear from Jason that he started his career here as well. This room, Chris Hawes, as a citizen, attended multiple meetings here while Boring Fire was going through this very process of doing a study together. Director Cross, very instrumental in bringing that to the Boring board and eventually to the voters. So lots of history. Marilyn Thomas were board members during all of that. So a ton of history in this room. And I can remember being hired here and in 2000, being part of the joint academy. Sandy, Boring, and Estacada did a volunteer academy together. So it seems like just yesterday, but that was 22 years ago. And the reason I talk about that is because in 2010, Clackamas Fire actually came to Boring Fire and asked for help with their volunteer program. And Director Steering was a division chief at that time, and he came here asking for help. And that long story, by 2012, had become an IGA agreement. And it had training, it had wellness, it had logistics, fleet, IT services. It had everything except command and control. The command and control was added about 8 or 9 months later in an amendment to the agreement. And by 2012, everything was going great. By 2014, the elected boards realized that this really was great for both communities, this IGA. Certain things happened and they moved to a vote at some point, 2016, and by 2017, it was, official. The reason I bring it up is it's been a pleasure to represent the Clackamas Fire family on this study. It's been a pleasure to work with Sandy on this study, which is where I live. I live in Sandy. So yes, there's a little bit of, I don't know, focus for me on making sure that you all get the right information and or have the ability to make a good decision at some point on whatever it is next steps might be. But I look around this room and I think back to then, and it was Boring Fire that was asking for the help at that time. It was Boring Fire that needed the help. The community of Boring needed the help. And now it's Sandy that's looking for the relationship to get stronger. And I'm just very, very proud and excited to be part of this piece of history that we're witnessing right now. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief McKinnon.
Thank you. I would also like to thank Chief Deers, the board of directors, the fire chiefs, and everyone that participated in the study, including AP Triton. As previously stated, I started my fire service career path in this exact building almost 30 years ago. Tonight is about a regional service to our communities, our neighboring communities, our partners, and all of our stakeholders. Just over 2.5 years ago, Sandy Fire was faced with some unique challenges and some great opportunities. We had a division chief retiring, as well as a decline in a volunteer force. Due to the immense and rapid growth of our community, Sandy Fire is having challenges meeting the needs of the community solely. This would give Sandy Fire a great opportunity to partner and be progressive in the direction to both benefit Sandy Fire and Clackamas Fire working together. We started off with command and control, which is battalion chief coverage 24/7. And we also started off with training both career and volunteer firefighters. 6 months later, we started paying for one shift at Station 18 located in Eagle Creek, allowing for 24/7 free personnel ALS engine coverage for initial response, mutual aid, and regional partnering. Sandy Fire would not be able to do any of this without Clackamas Fire's help. That is why we reached out and we started to collaborate and come up with a very effective plan to regionally provide service to both districts, communities, and the citizens. We're at that stage where we need to reevaluate how we can provide top-notch service to our community and families. Sandy Fire cannot continue providing the same level of service needed by the community alone. With that, I would like to introduce Kurt Ladapel with AP Triton to do our presentation.
Thank you, Chief. You did a great job. I just, now that we've finished the overview of the study, I'll go into no, I'm only kidding. Okay. The team. Tonight on the call, you have myself, Melissa Vasquez Swank, as well as Randy Parr. heart and soul of any project for Triton is the team. And you've heard this from us before. We pride ourselves in the fact that as we look at the project, we hand select the subject matter experts, and your project was no different. I will share with you now that your project has been completed and we're finishing this evening. Majority of the folks on this slide have already been released from the project and are now on other assignments. But I was very proud to work with this group. As was already mentioned, we did a lot of interaction, a lot of communication with the Sandy and the Clackamas team, and we're pretty pleased with the way this turned out. Hope you are too. So you're going to hear some things over and over, such as dates, such as terminology. You already know that in September of 2021, the districts, both districts, retained Triton to conduct a cooperative services feasibility study, which is a term that we typically use for projects such as this nature. Primary purpose was to evaluate the various options for jointly providing fire protection, EMS, special ops, and other services that would ultimately result in greater efficiencies, cost effectiveness, and improvements to emergency operations. After we were retained in September, we kicked the project off. You're going to hear from me 2 or 3 times the term snapshot in time. So the first definition or the first reference I want to make to snapshot in time is the data collection. So the data collection that was utilized for determining response, determining travel times, et cetera, was during the window of January 2018 to June 30 of 2021. We did kick off the project as soon as the contract was signed, and immediately started working with the district's teams to get the data into what we call into our drop boxes, so the team members could access everything they needed. The data loads, as we refer to them, were completed November 18th of 2021. The very first version of the technical review, and the technical review, if you will, is the meat and bones of all of our studies. The very first version was submitted to the district's team on April 13th of 2022. As we worked through and went through and addressed comments, addressed questions, addressed clarifications, it was identified and requested by Clackamas that we update some of the Clackamas financial information because of some recent changes, which were outside of the snapshot in time. We came to an agreement, and you see those in your study. The final version of the study was produced on July 18th of 2022. So really, for a study of this magnitude, we'd like to do things faster, but we believe in giving you a quality project. We have to take our time. At this particular point, I would like to acknowledge both boards and your teams for the emphasis on transparency and inclusivity in this process. And you merely need to look as far as Appendix A's and Appendix B's to see the extensive outreach that was completed, including a very comprehensive community-wide survey that had a significant number of responses. And what I'd like to share with you is you all are now the model for our community outreach. We are now building those options into every project that we do. And then Appendix B is the summarized results of the stakeholder interviews, which went on for 3 days, even though they were virtually. So hats off, just an incredible amount of outreach was encouraged and undertaken. You heard about the IGA already. I'm not going to go over it. However, as we started our project and I started to review the IGA with the team, what we identified almost immediately was a lot of the sections, a lot of the services that you had already implemented in your IGA actually track along with many of the initial recommendations we make on feasibility studies for agencies that have not already entered into this type of an agreement. So you are already pretty well out there with the sharing of resources in a formal agreement. So, obviously both boards agreed to the study. And this study reflects, here we go again, that snapshot in time. And there's just a reinforcement of the data dates we used. So I've already gone into this, but here's some of the key points of the analysis. Current service delivery, organizational structure, financial stability and sustainability, and much more. And as you have read through this extremely comprehensive study, you'll see, I'm sure you've seen that every one of those bullets are covered in depth in your study. Per our task, we evaluated the effectiveness of the current agreement. I've already acknowledged and given you kudos for that. Randy spent considerable amount of time in the finances, and Randy's on the call tonight, inclusive of micro and macro economics, growth projections, review of capital assets in the organizational structure. And if I forgot to introduce Randy, he is our lead finance subject matter expert and a CPA and a retired fire chief. We also identified future opportunities and challenges for future collaboration or integration. And at the end of the day, if you will, or at the end of the study, you have already seen the recommendations, and I'll definitely highlight our conclusion. So as we look at the overview of the services provided, for the most part, this is typical for what we call an all-risk organization. And there is one last bullet there, and that's ambulance transportation, whereas Clackamas does have ambulance transport, and we're aware that the entire system in the county's being studied. I don't know where that is at, but it was obvious to us in our analysis that Clackamas providing ambulance transportation was a key member of that plan. Service area, you live here, you know what it looks like. This is the snapshot in time in 2021. These are your stations, those are the boundaries. Nothing really new here, but as we reflect back on studies, I always remind the team how important it is to, wherever possible, do a study for the lay person. And this is important for us to set the stage. So when your constituents are reading the report and they see the service area and the location of the study of the stations, that they get a feel for the significant service delivery area that you currently run. Incidents per square mile, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind these have changed. What we have seen now coming out of COVID, that our numbers are tracking up. Matter of fact, all of our studies now, I'm making sure that we are moving forward and capturing as much data as possible into the newer years. And we're definitely seeing a recovery from the impacts of COVID from a service delivery perspective. Fire incidents per square mile. It's no secret. You all live there. You know where your density is. Density equals responses. People movement equal responses. People activity equal responses. And this is relayed in where a majority of your structure fire concentration is, but you have pockets of them throughout the service area. EMS, without a doubt, in the fire service, upwards of 90% of the fire agencies throughout the United States now provide some level of EMS, no different with your two agencies, and no different than some of the other data that you see in the report and some of our analysis. again, density equals call volume. People movement equals call responses. And that's what you're seeing here. Travel time coverage. Due to some of the remote nature of portions of your area, you do have some travel time coverages, challenges. Obviously, areas around the stations have the best travel times, and areas where you have the highest concentration of stations, you're going to have the best travel times. ISO. So you've been through the process with ISO, you know kind of how they work. So all that what this map does is it reflects the 5-mile distance limit from your stations, what their 5-mile reach is. And again, the higher the concentration of stations, the more overlap you're going to have. Without a doubt, when you have a service area that's as broad and stretched out as yours is, you will have a challenge assembling an effective firefighting force. The effective firefighting force is in essence measured by the critical tasking and the alarm assignments provided to us by the agencies. And in this particular case, your effective response force is typically the first alarm. No issues within the highest concentration area. The further out you get, the more challenged you become with getting the appropriate number of firefighters on scene. The next one is firefighting apparatus. And this is purely the number of resources, not necessarily the firefighters. And again, two districts such as yourselves, the way you're spread out, you are going to have challenges in this area. We always like to, and this is in your study, we like to take a look at some of the analysis from the citizen's perspective. So what you see in these two charts for the two districts are what the citizen feels. And I like to say this is from the time help, I've fallen and can't get up calls 911 to the time a piece of apparatus sets their brakes in front of the emergency. So that's all the segments of a response. It's the time it takes to answer a call. It's the time it takes to process the call. It's the time it takes for the crews to get the alarm and get rolling and then travel to the incident. So you see the differences there. And in the area of fire response, Clackamas is a little better than Sandy. Some of that has to do with the concentration and the density. We only have one slide in here on your workload projections. And the reason we've only put one in is because Clackamas is very, very similar. So as populations increase, and this is based on a 10-year look, all the other data is a 3-year look. So when our GIS analyst does calculates the projections, we look at 10 years of the 5 top National Fire Incident Reporting categories, which includes fire, medical, other. And we also look at the historical population figures for 10 years. And out of that, the GIS analyst will develop a trend analysis. So in this particular case, your fire calls are projected based on the trend analysis to remain fairly static. Hats off to the Fire Prevention Bureau and the community's safety records. Your other calls, which sometimes we consider as a catch-all, I refer to those as when they don't know who to call, they're going to call the fire department. That's for the steam looks like smoke calls. That's for I don't know what my problem is type of a call, and the chiefs can explain everything that's in that category. Not unusual for trend analysis. Your medical calls are projected to continue to increase. And as I said, when you look at the study on page 105, figure 106, Clackamas's projections are very, very similar. So I don't know if you all are like me or some of the folks that I used to work with. Whenever we had a study done when I was on the client side, we picked up the 150, 200 page, 300 page document, and we go right to the back of the report. I intentionally minimized the front end of this presentation to leave time for questions and answers at the end. So I'm going to work through highlights of the findings and recommendations. These are all within the report. In all honesty, what I have found in the years that I've been consulting, and prior to that, over 40 years in the fire service, I seriously doubt that you see very much on here that surprises you. You're there every day, you live it every day. Board members, you get the reports from your chiefs. Highest demand for services in the area of Station 71, and that was reflected on the mapping. The districts, Sandy, should ensure adequate staffing apparatus and available 24 hours a day. Sandy needs to monitor the demand for service. And this second station concern came up multiple times throughout our interviews, including one of our associates on site. And I believe moving forward, this may present a challenge. When we were there and when we were doing the interviews, it was obvious, given the size of Sandy's operation, as well as the number of people, the size of the budget, et cetera, there was an acute shortage of administrative support. In our opinion, an expansion with Clackamas should include additional support. When we were interviewing some of the Clackamas admin folks and talking about collateral duties, et cetera, it became very apparent that as a growing operation, some attention is going to have to be paid to admin support. Water rescue gear within the apparatus bay should be relocated. And then one of the things we look at on our check sheet is accessibility. And on our associate that was doing the facility inspections noted that there should be a path to the accessibility ramp at the annex facility. So this is Randy's section. I've asked Randy to be prepared to answer any questions you may have. You already know these things. This is nothing new. Your revenue growth is limited by legislation. However, it has been increased. The expanded service agreement could result in an increase in operating costs to Sandy. And Randy and I talked about this statement right here multiple times. Absent increased or supplemental revenue sources, it appears that a full consolidation or annexation may at this time be financially unstable. And I'm sure you're going to want to go back to that.
Kurt,
So, yeah.
Let me inject something. This statement was designed that if the annexation or consolidation did not occur, Sandy could not afford to continue to expand its service contract with Clackamas County. That is what this statement is attempting to indicate. The revenues are not there to continue to expand services and have Sandy pay for them. It does not indicate that, in fact, the combination would not be financially feasible. I think that now that you said something, that in and of itself, is what there might be some misunderstanding. But on a combined basis, this works very, very well. Just if it remains standalone with Sandy contracting with Clackamas County, then financially it will not work for Sandy.
So some of these subsets here are consistent and tie in with some of the recommendations. And Randy just hit on the first bullet. We interviewed the volunteers. To some degree, the volunteer programs are different. However, recruitment and retention does need to be continued and will need some attention. This last bullet actually ties right into our primary recommendation because it's not just the wellness program we're recommending. So we heard a lot about a previous agreement with a neighboring agency and the results of that. So we felt it was important to comment on that because at the time that occurred, it did appear that there was a negative impact on the Clackamas budget. Pension and OPEB are significant amounts. That's not new. Every place we're working in the West, we're seeing this. I know it's being addressed. However, it is a finding out of the financial review. And again, we have identified moving forward that the consideration for additional funding sources need to be considered. Current needs of admin support, we felt strong enough to put this in a second time. This was not an administrative analysis. It was a feasibility study. Moving forward, we believe it's important that you do a time and motion study, take a look at the collateral duties, take a look at span of control, span of expectations for your administrative support. So jointly, so those were kind of bouncing back and forth between the two individual agencies. You're working hand in glove now. A joint recommendation is consider developing a quarterly newsletter that serves both districts and the constituents in both of your districts. We believe that's a very positive recommendation, and moving forward, it will help your customers, your constituents understand the operation. Security of the stations was a concern to the point where we believe that a joint recommendation is take a look at the security of the stations. It's interesting. I shared with you, I've been on the job for a long time. In my wildest dreams, I never would have thought we'd be making this kind of a recommendation. But more and more often, we're seeing intrusion into what we always felt, even though it was the public's house, a safe area for our employees and our volunteers. When we interviewed the labor groups, we understood there was some traction to do some combination of the locals. And we believe that's a good movement after talking with the groups and getting their feedback and taking a look at it. Regardless of what moves forward, we believe that the groups should continue to make steps to merge their locals. As you move forward, particularly because even the IGA you have right now, you have folks working together. However, there are not at the time of the study. I have to continue. Sorry, at the time of the study, there was not a standardized job description for each position within those organizations. Performance standards in our business, as you know, are an important tool for us to measure our effectiveness. So this recommendation is that you develop a standardized response performance standards based on national standards, but customized to the district's specific geographic areas and population densities. One of the standard making organizations has actually eliminated a term for rural and the other one still has it. You have some areas that one size will not fit all in your response area. We also believe because you are running volunteers, it's important that you take a look at NFPA 1720 when you're establishing standards, performance standards for your volunteers. Medic units, and you see the unit hour utilization breakdown within the report. They have the highest, and I was just looking at this today, actually. They have the highest unit hour utilization rate. Now, it is interesting when we look at utilization rates for fire apparatus, we typically use a 10% threshold, meaning that once you hit 10+%, the potential for that unit not being available within its first due starts to increase significantly. Ambulance units are a little different. We believe even though your ambulance unit has the highest UHU rate, there's probably still some capacity there. I'll share with you. The private sector prefers to run a 30 to 40% minimum UHU, or what they call time on task, from a for-profit perspective. Most calls, you saw the map, most calls are within 8-minute travel time. That does not account for the call answer, the call process, and the turnout time. That's travel time modeled on the computer, utilizing posted speed limits, stops, turns, etc. Right now, the call processing and turnout time do exceed the national standards. It's interesting when we look at the response continuum, there's actually 2 areas that we can control, that we can improve. And one of them is how much time it takes the dispatchers to process that call and push the button. The other is how much time it takes the crews to respond. In other words, to get out of the station and get rolling. We absolutely never recommend exceeding the speed limit. And this next bullet goes hand in hand with what I just said. We believe it's important that the districts work with the comm center to see if there are any options to improve call processing times. We talked about a quarterly report. We actually talked about the citizens outreach letter or newsletter. This quarterly report is meant to be an internal document that is somewhat of a report card for your dispatch center and your crews on how well they're doing meeting the performance expectations that we are recommending you set. It was interesting when we interviewed the representative from the college. And like I said, you guys are there, you live it every day. You're probably well acquainted with the leadership at the college. But they had some excellent input and reinforced multiple times their desire to work with the districts to stand up a regional training site, utilizing funding available through the college process. And this may or may not have already started. I know we had some discussions about it earlier. So what's next? Our primary recommendation is an expanded functional and operational partnership. So as we were looking at all the options and doing our interviews and looking at the data analysis and looking at how long you were in the current IGA, we recognized that a little more time needs to go into building the relationship. And so with that, we believe the IGA, and I'll use the correct term that we have out of all the agreements here in a minute, be expanded. We believe with that expansion, it will strengthen the response programs. It will strengthen command and control. It will strengthen relationships throughout the communities. and internal to the organization with your responders and your admin folks. Right now, we believe that that's your most viable option. We did conduct, I've mentioned this a few times, and you can see the results, multiple interviews, employees, volunteers, elected officials, etc. And we, on several occasions, got the feedback that right now, or back then, when we were finishing the report, there didn't seem to be a strong appetite to move forward with a legal integration. So the recommended option, in essence, we believe that what the track you're on is very positive. We believe that there are opportunities for improvement. And sometimes folks refer to this as dating just a little bit longer. So Clackamas is in a position to assume all functions and activities known as the All Fire Protection Emergency Medical Services of the Sandy District. And we believe this is an important step, but a temporary one, the duration to be determined by the policymakers. And that's why that statement is in there until the elected officials deem the timing for legal consolidation is appropriate. You have all the financial information from Randy. You have the forecasting for several years out. So a lot of the legwork that would normally be undertaken is done. It will just have to be refreshed as you go along. So with that, I am going to turn the screen back, and per the chief's instructions, I believe this is the opportunity for us to attempt to respond to any questions that the board members may have.
This is the time now we'll have the board of directors to have an opportunity to ask questions and comments. Jay?
Yeah, Kurt, thank you for that great presentation. I'm hoping that some of the questions I asked will actually stimulate other people to ask better questions, but I'll kick it off. When you were doing your evaluation of EMS services, did you by chance or get any information from Randy Lauer or from Oregon AMR or from Clackamas County, Ratu Sani, to actually get solid data from what's going on with AMR and Clackamas County and what the current program that we have in place of looking at a new ambulance service contract moving up in the future and see what that whole deployment model looks like? Or are you using national assumptions, not local, actually local data that's actually happening right now?
We, for the period of the evaluation, all the data came from the CAD and the fire records management system of the districts. What's going on with county EMS was not within our scope. We did interview the director. To be honest with you, Director Cross, I'm not sure where that very large study that they commissioned is or what is going on with it at all.
That's fair. That is I guess, work in progress, but there's some significant changes coming over the next 2 to 3 years when it comes to EMS countywide. So that does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into the whole thing. The next question. You mentioned at one point during your presentation that Sandy Fire District cannot pay for more services, that they are kind of at the end of their money. But then you, at the end of your presentation, you say that we need to look at expansion. That seems to be a contradiction. You say they don't have the ability to expand, but then you say we need to look at expansion. It doesn't sound like they have the money to expand. So where are we at? What is that?
Yeah, I'll let Randy ask the money question. And yes, the recommendation is that the development, because we were not a master plan would spend a lot of time with the planners, the land use planners, et cetera. However, as we looked at the demographics and what's going on in Sandy, it became obvious that if we didn't mention how important it is to track what development is going on in Sandy and how that may or may not impact services, that we would be doing a disservice. Now, on the financial side, I'll turf it to Randy.
Yes, sir. It appears based on your 2022 budget that you're going to burn through almost $1 million between your revenue side and your expense side. Obviously, with a relatively small reserve amount, starting at about $3 million, that is not sustainable for very long. When we were reviewing the 2022 budget and looking at some of the data, the district even anticipates potentially having to have a $300,000 tax anticipation line of credit. Being a CPA, a fire chief, being a municipal finance officer for about 3 months, I made the mistake of walking past the city manager's office just after he got rid of a finance director. And so that didn't work out real well for me. But just having to even consider a tax anticipation loan of any amount just sends shivers down my back as far as your financial viability. So on a go forward basis, certainly it'll work for another year or two, but certainly not beyond that, based on the revenues that we're seeing, the potential growth of the revenues, and the growth of expenses that we're seeing, especially when you continue to talk about additional expansion of services between the districts.
Well, sir, thank you for that. That kind of answers my questions. It says that one part, it says that we don't have the money to expand. The recommendation doesn't sound feasible to do the expansion. So even though that's the recommendation. So, okay. Good enough. I hope somebody else.
Thank you, Jay.
I hope somebody else has some better questions than I did. So,
Anybody else?
I just have on that same tone there, I think on both sides, it mentioned that the operations are not sustainable within the existing revenue structures. I think for both Clackamas and Sandy, that statement was made. But in the report, I didn't see anything on any recommendations for cost containment or economies of scale or anything with looking at a future contract for services.
The scope of work is what drove the study, and the feasibility study does not necessarily do a deep dive into cost containment. We do those in other studies. We can do those. And, Randy has spent an incredible amount of time on the finances. Randy?
Yes, sir. Certainly, anytime you look at combining districts, there are certainly potential cost savings. You don't have separate record management systems. You don't necessarily have separate administrative staffs. The insurance programs, the software programs, all of that certainly can be looked at. Insurance is another one. If each district has base liability policies, then combining those certainly would reduce the amounts. Excuse me just a second.
Let me pick up from there while Randy silences that. Without a doubt, when we look at annexations, consolidations, the savings, as we all know, the only real savings is in labor. However, when you've got an organization that's running extremely lean, and I'll share with you, I sat in a room with a neighboring fire chief when I was a working fire chief. We locked the door and did an exercise of what it would look like if we combined resources. What we realized is we were both running so lean that any savings that we would identify was going to get burned up because we'd have to actually add overhead. Go ahead, Randy.
No, that's obviously what you have to consider. If both organizations are running very, very lean, then you'll find some savings, but not savings to the degree that would get you over the hump. Salary and benefits is 85 to 90% of your costs. If you can't glean savings in those two areas, then you're just not going to have the level of savings truly necessary to be successful. Again, absent some sort of additional revenue stream.
I was just gonna mention, in our interagency committee meeting, we had Mark and Justin and Thomas and I 2 weeks ago. I think I see the way I take the financial question as far as Sandy's ability to pay more was exactly what we talked about in the meeting. We talked about the current IGA. If you look at that menu of fleet and training and paying $500,000 for the staffing of Station 18, and you go down that list, that's what we're doing today. But if we just went forward in the status quo, and well, let's just renew that for another year, let's just continue that, are those costs actually accurate? Because when we looked at the 848 calls that Station 18 has ran for the last 12 months, 53% of those calls were in Sandy, 46% were, I'm sorry, 46 in Sandy, 53 in Clackamas. It's almost 50-50. So is paying $500,000 for a station that's cost them $2 million, you know, is that fair and accurate? Well, we don't really know because we haven't talked about it. And we talked about the command and control. Command and control services for Clackamas to provide that isn't even on that list. We're just kind of doing it because, or I'm sorry, sending an effective response force is not on that list. We're just doing command and control, which is, you know, $30,000 for the BC or whatever, but then we're sending crew 30 and we're sending, you know, 15 to 18 firefighters sometimes on all the calls. So so I took that as meaning if we're going to continue just figuring out what all of those services are, and do we need to reevaluate those amounts, and if that increases the cost, then that's what may not be feasible. And then with the cost of a contract for service, that wasn't done in the study because that really would be done by us. If Sandy said, okay, well, what would a contract for service look like where we just do it all? Well, then that's what the chief's staff would, the two chiefs departments would work together and come up with that. That isn't really anything that the consultant would do. We just do that on our own. So I thought I would mention that, does that make sense? But just a couple of general comments. I've been around probably longer than anybody in the room. And this is the first study that was never done by the previous company that's done all of our studies. So it's nice to have another company do a study for Clackamas that we were involved with. And congratulations, I thought it was well done. Thank you to the chiefs, Jason, Steve, you did a great job. A lot of work, a lot of involvement. The chiefs did a good job. And it's been a pleasure to be on the interagency committee with our colleagues. And it's
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I have a
Andrew?
financial question. So is the big red flags you're seeing on Sandy's budget just the placeholder in the budget for the tax anticipation loan? Because we haven't used the tax anticipation loan for years. It's essentially a placeholder in there in case you know, something happens where we don't get the revenue or some inadvertent overspending. But
Yes,
in my
yes,
mind,
sir.
I feel like we're in a pretty good financial state as far as putting, you know, having good capital assets, putting money in savings and still paying for things, and putting money in savings and having, you know, land facilities accounts and so on and so forth. So saying that Sandy isn't looking good financially kind of set red flags off to me. I didn't know we don't have the money to, like, if we were to do all this ourselves and hire everybody for, to have the same services, then yes, but to continue doing what we're doing or even expand to a contract for services, I feel we have the money. That's why I guess I'm trying to figure out where you're
Yes,
saying we
sir.
don't.
If I may, through 2021, you're right, you're putting money in savings and things are looking good. But your 2022 budget anticipated a fairly significant growth in expense. Total expenses went from 3,750,000 in 21 to projected to be 5,283,000 in 22. Your revenue stream went from 4,341,000 in 21 to 4,380,000 in 22. Therein lies the crux of the problem. The expansion of services, the cost of the expansion of services, based on the information that I've gleaned through the 22 budget, the 22 filings that you all had to do for your taxpayers, just indicates to me that on a go-forward basis, it's not going to be sustainable. Now, if I have missed something, which I don't think I have based on everything that I've looked at, then certainly I'll take another look. But this information is from your documentation.
Chief, do you show us spending $5 million this year? I mean, the budget, but with cash carry forward and all that might exceed 5 million, but we're not spending that, I don't believe.
What I'm showing right now is 3,284,000 in personnel services, 1,739,000 in materials and services, and 465,000 in capital outlay. Those are your budgeted numbers.
Randy, is that Clackamas or Sandy?
That's Sandy.
I don't have our budget, Brent, let's hold the take it, pull it up. I got it already. Okay. Because I know the budget we approved, needed less than that for tech.
I think the whole board is a little bit puzzled and stymied by the numbers that are going through. It's not.
Yeah, I don't think those numbers are accurate as far as what our actual budget's looking like. And I know you're using the numbers you were given, but I think we're trying to pull up the right numbers here to, we don't have red flags for no reason.
We just got done doing the budget. It was honestly the opposite of what I'm hearing.
It was
Right.
Okay,
best that I've seen.
great.
But you just did the 22-23 fiscal year.
Yeah.
Where this was all 21.
It was still.
Yeah,
But it's still great.
So, and we're being pretty conservative. We're thinking of the numbers.
Well, we also know what they're actually spending. Totally get that. One thing's budgeted, it's another thing to spend it.
There's something very much off here.
Yeah. While they are looking up, Marilyn has a question.
Yeah, I have a question on the financial numbers too. And so are these numbers are used for our revenue estimated business for Clackamas estimated revenue stream? Are those gross numbers, are those adjusted after taking into account the losses we have from people who don't pay and also from urban renewal?
Yes, ma'am. We do not show the revenues at the gross amount. We usually take 2 to 4% for a non-payment.
What about urban renewal adjustment? We lose over $1 million to urban renewal.
Okay, I couldn't understand you. If you could repeat the question, please.
We also suffer a loss of revenue that is scraped off by the urban renewal districts in excess of $1 million. And how is that accounted for in your gross, in your numbers, that adjusted for that. Sandy
Uh,
also loses money because they're subject to urban renewal district as well. We have 5, 6, 7, I don't know, lots.
But Mark, didn't we provide these numbers now?
Yeah, Marilyn, those, the
So are
the
they,
loss of
are they
renewal money.
adjusted?
Yeah, it's adjusted.
Because both departments, these are the numbers that we gave them, so. If there's-
Yeah, I think there's some clarification on our budget. Chief's gonna, Bill, can you kind of explain
Yeah,
the,
well, that's our total spendable budget. I mean, those are used in, I believe, all of our capital accounts, our land facilities, our apparatus. We do put it in as we can spend them in that year if we had to. But those are reserve funds that we do not spend. And I think that's how, because we don't spend 5 million.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, excuse me. I mean, a budget, at least in Texas, is the authority to spend money. And all I can work with is what I see in your documentation. If you're only going to spend $1 million on salaries or on wages, and your budget calls for $3 million, then I don't know how to get past that.
So the question is, well, actually, the clarification has already been made. We work with the information provided to us. We have a rather extensive list of information requests and data tables. And in addition to that, Randy always goes after additional information, and we go back and forth a lot internally on questions. If the information that we were provided did not have enough clarification for us to give you a good analysis, then we need to revisit the information that was provided and determine, and we're willing to do this, determine if it was an oversight on our part or if the information simply was not shared.
because I mean, I feel like, and I'm probably speaking for all of us, that we're pretty comfortable with the amount of money that we're bringing in versus the money we're spending and the money in our savings. We aren't, I mean, everybody's running lean because they're trying to get as many people as they can, but we're not overspending by any stretch of the imagination. So saying that we can't expand our services, I don't think is a true representation of the money that we have available.
Andrew, is that the numbers given to them? Is there numbers that they are showing? Is that reflecting correctly the numbers you gave?
I don't, but I think we're gonna have to
Who's,
look. We're gonna have to read.
Probably have to go back and
Yeah.
see what it was that we turned in.
And in addition, there were no less than 4 or 3 technical reviews on the document, and the financial information was in there. We did receive a request from Clackamas to utilize newer information, and we granted that request. And so you'll see a little bit of difference in some of their numbers. We did not receive a request on Sandy's part to look beyond the study window. But as I say, if we were provided information, and it's easy to review because most of it is actually sitting in the client upload Dropbox. If we were provided information and there was an oversight on our part, we absolutely never hesitate as a company and as a position for the Vice President of Operations. We never hesitate to re-review the information that was provided.
No, I'm not saying you guys are providing, false information here. I think it may be an interpretation of how our budget is prepared, or maybe how those numbers are provided, because I think either you guys are looking at that we're spending more than we actually are versus what we're spending and what we have available to spend, even though there's no plan on spending it, like like having your checking account, your savings account, you're not planning on spending both. You just can if you need to.
What would you recommend
better.
what would you recommend, Kurt, going forward with this? What they are disputing the numbers on the report. Where do we go from here?
My recommendation is that the information that's been provided to us be reviewed by the teams. And if we've made a misinterpretation of that information, then we'll go back and reanalyze it. Part of the review also includes the budget message. I mean, that's a typical process for us. So I go back to the offer. Once the internal district teams take a look at the information that was provided to us, if we have made an error, then we'll go back and redo the numbers.
We both the group, your group as well as us, review the numbers. And so that we can adjust the report. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, certainly, because here's what occurs. This is why we ask for actual numbers. And we load the actual numbers in. Obviously, when you get to a budget, then you drop the budget numbers in and you move forward with your projections based on the trends that you've seen on the historic numbers applied to that budget. Unless there's anomalies in the budget, one-time expenditures of funds like $200,000 for a CAD system or something like that. But typically, if the budget numbers are operational numbers and appear to be in line with what the narrative of the budget is, then we move forward with making our projections based on that latest set of budget numbers.
I do want to share that on almost every study of this type, there's always a fair amount of discussion when it comes to finances. We anticipated it. Randy and I had lengthy discussions about it. And in all honesty, this is the first time we're hearing that there may be some, I'm not going to say mistake, but miscalculations, and we're prepared to redo them.
Certainly.
In the event the information, we overlook something in the information that was provided. We would also offer the same arrangement to Sandy that we made with Clackamas, in that we did a minor adjustment to the contract, and we actually brought in on the Sandy side, on the Clackamas side, the most recent information that the finance director wanted us to take a look at.
Yes, since you all have closed out June 30th of 22, if you can provide the actual numbers on that report, I can take a look and see what that looks like against that budget, and drop in actual numbers for June 30th of 22.
And I'll take it a step.
I think that when Kurt started this off, he used the word transparency, and that's what we're all after. So I walked in here kind of like my checkbook. I kind of knew where we stood. I felt really good about it in terms of our financial position. And then when I heard that, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? So either there's been some miscommunication, misinterpretation, whatever it is. I think we're all, I think, in agreement is let's look at correcting it and moving forward. I don't think we're gonna do it tonight, but again,
We won't have
Yeah.
time to do it tonight.
We'll get the numbers, because I think that's what's happening is we pulled 2.6 million over. And I think they're showing that as usable money. I mean, it is usable, but 2.6 plus all of our accounts, 300 and apparatus, all those we're putting as 100% usable. And so as he's taking all those numbers, it's putting us in a deficient because we don't spend the 5 point. And so we'll have to get together and we can get them.
Chris?
I mean, that's actually one of the questions I had, because I saw that when I looked at the report, because there was this big jump.
Yeah.
There was this big jump, and why did that happen? So I guess that we're noticing it here for the first time is because I was gonna ask the question. I think what Jay was talking about expansion, I guess what I read was and heard was something different. they're saying expansion twice, but they're saying expansion in two different ways. And Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were talking that in the future, Sandy expanding to like 2 stations, they can't really afford to do that.
Correct.
But your recommendation for expansion for this agreement is to expand the cooperation between the 2 agencies. So it's
Yes,
2 different versions of expansion.
correct.
That, okay.
So as far as this numbers for the Sandy Fire, what, so both chief and your crew
Yeah.
get together with Kurt and his team, and we can review it.
Yes.
We don't, I'm not saying it should be corrected, but we should review and see where did we go wrong.
Let's not say, where did we go
Yeah.
wrong? Because I don't think anybody did anything wrong.
No.
There's a budget number, and then there's a real number that's going to be expended. And that's all we need to figure out. I just need to figure out what got spent in 2022, and then what your 23 budget looks like. And then talk to the team about what does your real number look like for 23, not what your budget number is.
Yeah, because when we're building the budget, it's taxes necessary to balance the budget, and it's for something.
And that's a foreign concept to me, where you have the opportunity to, well, this is the amount of taxes we need to have to balance the budget. It doesn't work that way in Texas. These are the taxes, and this is what you can spend.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a lot of the cash carry forward so we don't have to have the tax anticipation loan it's kind of muddying the water here. And
Randy, can you tell me why the tax anticipation loan that we haven't used in maybe 12 years or more, why that's a red flag for you?
Well, just when somebody says that we don't have enough money to get from this point in the year to where we start collecting taxes again, and we need potentially a tax anticipation line of credit, that tells me that there's not sufficient reserves in the system to avoid having to borrow the money to get there. That
historically we've had it many years ago. It was used, but it's not been used at least in a decade. So and maybe it's something that we don't need to have, but we have certainly always done that as a stopgap, just in case something happened.
Yes, ma'am. And certainly if that's what you guys always do, but never use it, that's great. That's great. It just, for me, again, I'm a conservative person, that when I see a vehicle like that, it concerns me that there's not enough reserves in the system to get you to the point where you're collecting taxes again.
So, one thing I do want to point out, Randy keeps bringing up Texas. Randy has been with me for several years and is my go-to on all of our projects in the West because of his familiarity with districts, California, Oregon, et cetera. So I know he likes to kind of reference Texas a little bit. I do want to go back to the offer that I made. We'll make the same offer for Sandy that we did for Clackamas. We'll get together with your finance designee and get all the updated data and rerun it.
Okay. Let's move on with that. Okay, any other directors have questions? No questions? Okay. Good. Thank you so much. I think I don't hear any questions from the board. Now we are going to have public comments. Steve, is that going to be to them or to us?
Public comment.
Public comments, okay. I now call for statements from citizens regarding the Clackamas Fire and Sandy Fire business. If you would like to provide a public comment, please use the right hand function, raise hand function for the bottom of your screen. If you are calling in, you can select *9 to indicate a raised hand and *6 to unmute or mute. Each person will have up to 3 minutes to share their comments or questions. Please state your name and the city you reside in at the beginning of your question. Ariel, did we have anybody sign up to provide public comment?
We did not. We had one person with their hand raised, but it looks like he lowered it.
Did you say they left?
Yeah, they no longer have their hand raised, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if they still want to provide comment.
Okay. We'll give them a second. I don't think. Anything else?
The Hollywood Squares world we live in today. Without Charlie Weaver.
But if we don't have any questions from the public and directors, so with that, we adjourn the work session at 7:16 PM.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
We
Doug.
appreciate it. Thank you.